Hello, today I'm going to talk about the Apple Foxconn scandal or crisis and how Apple was able to manage this crisis. So, a little bit brief background here. Back in 2009 and 2010, Apple's iPhone was China's best-selling smartphone, and there was a tremendous demand for the iPhone all over the world. To produce the iPhone and satisfy the demand for iPhones, Apple needed really cheap labor, but also people that were relatively skilled as worker because it involves electronics and assembly. China naturally became the ideal location for manufacturing because it had abundance of labor, which was very cheap, but also quite skilled. Because China produces a lot of electronics and digital equipment. Foxconn is a Taiwanese company that is China's single largest employer. I think in 2016, they employed about roughly 1.6 million people in China. And obviously, they are Apple's biggest manufacturing partner in the world. Actually, so Foxconn is constructed by Apple to produce iPhones in China, and the primary facility of their manufacturing is in Shenzhen in southern China, and this is a huge factory that employs about 450,000 workers at one point. In 2010, reports from the media and labor watchdogs surfaced that the reported there were a lot of suicides occurring in the mega factory. So one report in China said a total of 14 people killed themselves in 2010. They were all workers at the factory. Investigators from the media and other sources revealed that Foxconn's plant had three major problems, which was the fact the workers were extremely underpaid, even by Chinese standards. There were frequent overtime demands without pay, because the demand for the iPhone was just tremendous at that time. And Foxconn, in order to manage such a large plant, had a military-style work culture, where essentially these workers were treated like soldiers all the time. This resulted in mental breakdowns which lead to suicide. Apple's response to these allegations had two core strategies, which is to show sincerity in implementing change and offer the public full transparency on the issue. So immediately, Apple said, there's a problem, we are going to fix it. They set up a task force to investigate the issue. They put up measures to prevent suicides. They promised to evaluate the supply chain, and they allowed the third party to independently monitor the situation over time. And here's we can see a statement from Tim Cook that I think should show the attitude of Apple during that time. Looking at this crisis, what are some of the major threats to Apple that could happen? According to Combs, the three biggest threats to a company during a crisis is public safety, financial loss, or reputation loss. Is this a public safety issue? Sure, it is. But we also have to consider the location of the operations, which is China. They are not really that sensitive over labor exploits. So the government of China didn't really come out say it's a problem, or at least not a forceful manner. Financial loss is obviously not a major concern here because the crisis is not really distributing their supply chain. What Apple is concerned about is their reputation, especially as a brand from the US where labor relations is more sensitive to Americans and other Westerners. Apple don't want to be labeled as a company that exploiting people or in the business of building sweatshops, which will damage its brand image. I think what Apple did was very smart, which is to have a strategy that focused on repairing their image in the Western customers. And this is accomplished through building transparency as well as promising change. The result of Apple's crisis communication was, in my opinion, very successful. Apple's promised change did take it into effect, and this dramatically reduced the number of suicides. But also, I think Apple indirectly blamed the Foxconn instead of taking responsibility themselves. Apple kind of emphasized the idea this was Foxconn's problem, not ours. And in several press releases by Apple, we see that as well. In that way, people are going to be looking at Foxconn more carefully and criticizing Foxconn instead of Apple. But there are still problems, and the reports continue to show that working conditions are still bad, and people continue to work overtime, even though there hasn't been any reports of suicides in recent years. There are consistent reports of complaints, but there isn't really any major media focus on that anymore. Thanks for listening my presentation.